So, dressing for success. I will be the first one to admit I'm not a fashionista. I tend to buy clothing that is classic, so it lasts forever, good quality. I might buy an occasional fashionable piece here and there, a fashionable piece of pair of shoes, but I'm not a fashionable person. I don't think of myself that way. And when I had to return to the workforce, I had no wardrobe because it had been almost 20 years since I had worked. And I had casual wear and I had some church dresses, but I really didn't have anything that I felt super comfortable in that I could wear. So we're going to talk about some of those different ideas and how to build that confidence too. And our agenda, first thing is we'll talk about the importance of dressing for professional settings and all different types of settings. And then we're also going to talk about understanding professional dress codes because these different settings have different dress codes, some of the common concerns and anxieties about how to dress when you return to the workforce. At least I know I had them. And so we're going to go over that. That's going to be the bulk of our evening, and hopefully that'll be really helpful. So dressing for success in professional settings. So when I returned to the workforce after being out for 20 years, I went to KT Tape, and the dress was, it wasn't business casual per se, a little bit nicer than business casual. And so when we talk about business casual, what it is it's business attire with a casual twist. So think of business attire being suits, slacks, dresses, skirts, heels. But when it's business casual, you can change it a little bit. So for example, it could be slacks and a less fancy blouse, but still like a nice top. It could be jeans with a blazer, so like a suit blazer, or you could be wearing flats instead of heels with a jean skirt. So when they talk about business casual, that's sort of what they're talking about. So this job that I had, I really didn't have clothing to wear. And so when I went my first day on the job, I wore just like a skirt that I had and a nice little top. But I realized very quickly that I needed to upscale my wardrobe because it was not quite appropriate. And Harvard Business did a study about a few years ago, and they found that 45% of your impression that you make when you go in for your job or when you are interviewing is how you sound, and 55% is what you wear, what you look like. So you want to make sure that that first impression is really strong and brings out the best in you and also shows what you're capable of in that professional setting. So the professional dress codes nowadays, it changes over time, right? So oftentimes I look at this in a professional setting that is a typical attire where you're wearing a nice blazer or a nice blouse, slacks, skirt. That I think of as more business attire. And a lot of settings have this type of attire, and we'll talk about some of those different settings in just a little bit. And then something that's as casual as a nice blazer, but wearing jeans. So she still looks nice. And here's one, again, blazer, and then some really shiny pants. They almost look like jeans with a shine to it, or sheen. And here is another gal, I think she's wearing jeans, but just a turtleneck and a nice little vest. And then this setting is her attire is for her area, her industry. So my guess is that she's probably in tech. So she can wear a little bit more casual. She's not going to be in front of customers and other business people, and so she can be more comfortable. And I know that I had a really interesting situation when I got a job working in New York City. And so when I went to this new job, I was wearing the normal clothes that I was wearing for my other job, and I had pink and red and bright colors, and I was in New York City new and in this job, and I was working for the CFO of Time Warner at the time, and we were having investment bankers coming through and lawyers and things like that. And one of the lawyers came up to me and he said, "Do you always wear such bright colors?" And he said it with kind of a like disgust, like sort of like, "Do you always wear just bright colors?" And I thought to myself, I didn't think I wore bright colors. I mean, I had pink and green and red and, happy colors, but I didn't, like, they weren't neon. And I looked at my wardrobe. I went home and I looked at my wardrobe, and literally everything in my wardrobe was super colorful and bright. And I thought to myself, well, doesn't everybody wear bright, pretty colors like that? So I went back the next day into the office, and I noticed no one wore bright, happy colors. They wore navy and dark blue colors and black and grays and whites and browns, very neutral, no color. But it hadn't occurred to me until this person had come into the office and said, "Do you always wear such bright colors?" And I was kind of like shocked. And so I thought to myself, oh, I am sticking out like a sore thumb. Nobody else had said anything. And certainly they probably didn't want to make me feel bad, but I felt super self-conscious. I was like, oh, I am just the only one wearing bright colors. And so I changed my wardrobe. And I didn't work there for super long, because then I had my first child, and then I went out of the workforce and didn't go back for a long time. But my wardrobe still to this day, blacks, navies, whites, grays, browns. I don't have very many colorful, outfits or anything, because it just got so ingrained in me that you don't wear these bright colors in the professional, at least in those offices. And I'm sure there were people on other floors that wore colorful outfits, but for me, that was something that I recognized. And so whatever professional setting you are in, you should dress appropriately. So think about what the other people are wearing, et cetera. So when you go in for an interview, and a lot of interviews nowadays are online, so you don't get a chance to actually go into the office at the early stages. And certainly if it's remote, you may never go into the office. But take a chance to look at the different apparel of people in the office and see what they're wearing. I still recommend that when you go in for an interview, you actually dress really professionally, meaning in business attire. I would wear a skirt and heels and a blouse, even if it's at a tech job and they're wearing jeans and t-shirts. I think it just says something that you cared enough to dress nicer. And it's interesting, Mark Zuckerberg tells a story where he's the founder and CEO of Facebook, and he is known for always wearing a gray t-shirt and jeans. But one year they had a very important initiative, and he wore I think he wore a tie and a dress shirt, or a suit and tie, every day to show how important this initiative was. And I think when you dress nicer, it also causes you to take more care in your job or think more about it. And so I would encourage you that even if you're in a setting where you can be a lot more casual, let's say jeans and t-shirt, that you do dress a little nicer. And certainly if you are wanting to be considered for a role that's more management or something that's more administrative, and you want to be able to have more interaction with upper level executives, depending on what type of job it is, you might want to dress the part of where you want to be. So certainly in my company that I work for, if I want to be considered for the C-suite, meaning the highest level of executive, I would want to dress as they do, right? So you give off an impression based on what you wear, and they consider you as like, oh yeah, you could. It's funny, people can visualize you in that next role if you're already dressing that way. So what's important to realize is all different areas of business and industries have different dress codes. So for example, creative and design, if you work for an agency that's creative and design, they might be a lot more casual. Corporate professional like banking or a law firm, you will wear more business attire. In New York City, I thought it was really interesting. I would get on the subway wearing my tennis shoes and have my high heels in my backpack. And when I would get to the office, I would switch out of my tennis shoes and put my heels on. And that's what everybody did. You would see people walking the streets in their nice business attire, suit and skirt. And then they would change out of their heels at work, put on their tennis shoes to go back home. And some of my coworkers would just have the heels in their drawer, their desk drawer, and they would switch them out because they had to wear the nicer heels, but they certainly wouldn't be comfortable walking the streets of New York City. Tech startups like this one young woman are a lot more casual. And a lot of it is because either they work remotely or they're not having interaction with people coming in and out. And so jeans, t-shirts, casual dress wear, that's very, very normal. If you're in healthcare, you're going to wear hospital scrubs. You're in very comfortable shoes because you're on your feet all day. You're not going to wear a suit and tie, dress, fancy or really formal. If you're in, retail, like a retail store, you're going to, dress a little bit nice, but not, super fancy unless you're in a high-end retail store. If you're in construction or manual labor, you would wear jeans and steel-toed shoes, boots. You wouldn't wear anything that was super fancy nice. And so even though I showed you all these pictures of women in more formal attire, it really depends on where you're working. If you're working at a daycare with children and you're on your knees and on the ground with them, you would want to wear really comfortable clothing, and you would want to wear clothing that could get dirty. And so certainly consider where you're going to be working. And I think it's always important too to realize that you need to be comfortable in what you're wearing. And so if you don't really like wearing a skirt, and there are women at the office that are wearing skirts, you can just wear slacks, but definitely dress nice. Lots of times companies will have it in their handbook, their employee handbook, what you can wear and what you can't wear. And what's also interesting is nowadays a lot of jobs are remote, and sometimes people take that as a sign to be more casual, that they can wear their more casual, comfortable clothing because they're not going into the office. And while certainly there are some organizations that are okay with that, you want to make sure that the organization that you're going to be working for is okay with that as well. And and sometimes when I have calls, even though I work remotely, even though I have a Zoom call with, I'll have a Zoom call on a day with some of my coworkers, and sometimes I'll have a Zoom call with external people. I'll dress nicer on the days when I know we're going to be meeting with executives, or when we're going to have a call with some external people that I want to put on a good impression. And so consider that too, even if you're working remotely, what you wear because of the impression that you give. And so understanding those dress codes for the area that you're working, the organization you're working for, is really important. And I just shared, just want to show you this picture because it has just a nice variety of different clothing that is typically accepted in a lot of jobs nowadays. So you've got someone dressed in a nice dress, you have somebody that's in jeans and a blazer, and it's a nice, variety of different looks. But if you notice, they all look put together. They all look nice. And I think that that's something that's important regardless of where you work, that you're always taking the extra time to, look good and look appropriate. Okay, so I told you most of the time we were going to be spending addressing common concerns and anxieties, because I know I certainly had a lot of these concerns and anxieties when I returned to the workforce, because I had a really outdated wardrobe and I didn't know what to do. So what I did was I assessed my current wardrobe. I looked at my wardrobe to see what I had. And I think it's important to look at those pieces that you have and find, and actually go through and find the pieces that have sentimental value. Like, for example, I have a sweater that belonged to my grandmother and I'm never going to get rid of it. I don't wear it very often, but I'm going to keep it always. The other items that could be a nice foundation for your attire for wherever you're going to work potentially. So pulling out those pieces that, yep, this is going to work, this will be just fine. And then also identifying those pieces that are in good condition that you aren't going to have to replace because they're still in good condition. And then those items that are dated, don't fit you anymore, you've not worn for a really long time, DI them, give them away. Somebody else is going to use them and need them. And if you take them to like Goodwill, then they will be able to get them in the hands of those that really need them too. So I think that's something that always makes me feel really good. So even though I know I'm parting with something that I might have spent really good money on it at some point, another person is going to be able to take advantage of it. And that makes me feel really good. So do an assessment. So go through everything and really look at it. Just say, am I going to wear this in the next year? And because I know I've been there. I've looked at, I have a blouse that I bought and I spent good money on it, and I don't wear it very often because I liked it when I bought it, but I don't know. I just don't know that I like it as much anymore. and I really should give it away. And this is a good thing for me to do this class because I need to just get it out of my closet and make room for something else, and certainly bless somebody else that could use it. So after you do this assessment, like I said, you're going to then identify some of your key pieces that you want. Now, this again isn't going to work for every industry. If you're working in tech, some casual clothes are great. If you're working in construction or manual labor, you're going to want jeans. So assess your wardrobe for where you want to potentially work. And if you don't know yet, that's okay. I think it's still good to go through and purge out of your wardrobe the clothing you're not going to wear. And so at bare minimum, that's what you should do. So the pieces that I think are really important to have in your wardrobe is have a classic blouse, a tailored blazer, so a well-fitted blazer, a shift dress, which is just a versatile dress that doesn't have fitted bodice. It's usually just like it just hangs and you can put a belt around it, or you can wear it just normal. You can dress it up with a scarf or a nice necklace, and then also comfortable heels or flats. And certainly I love wearing heels, but not everybody does. And you can buy also very nice flats that will work just as well in a professional atmosphere. And then once you have gone through and you've done this assessment and you have found your pieces that are, build the foundation, then you're going to go and you're going to look at the other pieces that you've identified that you still want to keep and see if they need to be updated at all. So for example, I had a blazer that when I went back to work, it still fit me, and I changed the buttons on it. So I went to Joann Fabrics and I bought new buttons, and I, made it look a little bit nicer than it was. And that's something you can do really easily. Something else you should consider doing is getting your clothing tailored. So for example, our bodies change over time. Sometimes we need to let something out in the waistband. Sometimes we need to have something gathered and brought in. And look at some of the clothing that is still very classic, is in good condition, and just needs to be tailored a little bit. Because certainly that's another way that you can save money. So another recommendation is to invest in timeless accessories. So I don't have a lot of accessories because I don't care to wear them, but I know a lot of people that will buy a nice scarf or a nice necklace, a pretty belt, those kind of accessories that can up-level the outfit and make them look even nicer. So if you had like a regular shift dress, you can make it look more fancy by wearing a fancier necklace or a nice belt or scarf. So think about some of those accessories that you may not have that you want to go out and purchase, because those accessories aren't going to cost very much money. And that can up-level your wardrobe quite a bit. Think about quality over quantity. It's interesting, when I was in middle school, I had a school teacher who came over from the UK, and she did an exchange with my teacher, and she wore the same outfit, I think, every single day. Like I don't remember that she wore anything different. And it was very, very nice. Like she dressed nicely every single day, and she didn't have to think about what she wore, but it was professional, and she was comfortable in it, and it worked for her. So I think you need to give yourself a break about what you're wearing, and not be overly concerned, but certainly make sure that you have those items that are nice quality, that will last you a long time, and not a ton of quantity. Now, some people may have the luxury of having a lot of money and they can buy lots of different outfits, and that will serve them well. But then think about how much time you have to spend deciding what you're going to wear when you have a closet full of different clothing. So I like to prioritize quality over quantity. And so even if it means saving up your money to buy a really nice suit, jacket, blazer, I would recommend that over buying a bunch of cheaper clothing that over time will either be worn out or are really high fashion, so they're going to go out of style as well. I also like the idea of focusing on items that complement your existing wardrobe. So as you're looking for new pieces to add, look at the different items that you already have and see what might work, see what might mix and match. And so what I also like to do is take the clothing that I have in my closet and pair them up and make them like, okay, I'm going to grab this blouse and this skirt with these heels and see how it looks. And oh, that would look really great with this scarf or whatever it happens to be. Kind of play around with it, get a feel of what you really like, and even maybe put them on, make sure that you do really like them instead of just, it looks great hanging in the closet, make sure that it actually fits. Something else that I think is really important to recognize too is that there are just things that go out of style. And if you haven't been in the workforce for a while, you may not even know that they've gone out of style. And so talking to friends and family who are in the workforce, if they're in your industry, that's even better, and ask them, what are you wearing? And certainly you can get on LinkedIn, get on the internet, you can do searches for different industries and what people are wearing. You can get a good sense of what is acceptable, what isn't, and then go back into your wardrobe and see, does that, do those pants really, is that, is style? Not that it has to be fashionable, but you want it to fit well and you want it to not look overly dated. And you want to just make sure you look a little bit more contemporary if possible. Something else I think it's important is making sure you're choosing fabrics and styles that are your taste. So just because Susie in the workforce likes to wear slacks and heels, if you don't like that, don't wear that. You don't have to wear what other people are wearing. Find what works for you, and as long as it's still professional, that's going to work great. And the other thing that I thought was interesting too is like your body does change over time. So when you talk about concerns and anxieties, like that's going to be something. I know when I started going through menopause, or the pre-menopause, I recognized that some slacks that I love that I haven't worn in a while because I haven't had to, I can't fit in them anymore, and I need to purge them from. I keep thinking to myself, I'm going to lose more weight and I'll be able, but I think when you get to a certain place, you've had kids. I don't know that I'm going to get where I want to be able to wear those, and I don't think it matters. But yeah, you have to go through and see, and certainly you're more self-conscious over time too, because you're thinking, oh, I used to be able to wear those. Why do I not? Don't beat yourself up. I know it's going to happen, but just recognize that that's just nature, and that's going to happen over time. Budget constraints. So I had a lot of anxiety over this. I had no budget. So when I had to go back to the workforce, I was divorced. I had to provide for my family. I was cutting coupons. I was trying to make ends meet. I had no income. My ex-husband wasn't working. And so there wasn't a way to really go out shopping for a new wardrobe. I would have loved to be able to say, take the credit card and go shopping, but I really didn't have a way to pay for it. So I had to be creative. And I think that's one of the things that you have to do when you are having to return to the workforce. Oftentimes you don't have that luxury of having the money. So I went to consignment shops. I did a search to find out what consignment shops were local. I found a consignment shop in Salt Lake that I absolutely love. They're not in business anymore. I think they went out of business during COVID. But I would go there and I could find such great clothing that somebody else had paid full price and I paid a fraction for them. I also found clothes at Desert Industries and also Goodwill, and found some great pieces that weren't, very expensive. Savers is here local. And I just would go there frequently just to check to see were there any new items that had been dropped off. And I could find slacks really inexpensively, and blouses and things like that. Now, there will be some people that will donate them because they're not in fashion and they're very old. So you'd want to make sure that you're getting things that will be appropriate. But I found some great deals, and it always made me feel really excited that I was able to get something at such a great price. And I also would go to garage sales. And so during the summer months, if I knew that there was a garage sale listing way back in the day, you could find out when people were putting them in the classifieds. You could find out which garage sales were having clothing being sold. So I would go. Now we have Facebook Marketplace and eBay, and you can do searches that way and get clothing really inexpensively that way too. I also reached out to some of my friends and I just said, hey, I'm going back in the workforce, and if you have any clothes that you were going to take to DI, I'd love to take them off your hands. I had no problem asking for help that way, and so I was able to get some pieces through some of my friends as well. And there's no, I think there's great. I don't know. I feel I have great pleasure when I'm able to get something at a great price or for a great deal, simply because I took the time to go find other resources. So, don't be afraid of that. Also, too, something else that I realized when I had to go back to the workforce is the heels that I had were really worn out. And so I went to the local shoe place and had new heels put on and polished them and made them look more professional that way. I hadn't realized how bad they looked until I took a good look at them. And so do have a discerning eye when you look at your wardrobe to see, is this really going to work? Does this look professional? So I, bought also shoe polish to be able to polish some of my shoes just to make them look, again, a little bit nicer. Another fear that you might have is some of the anxiety that comes from stereotypes, right? So you don't want to, I know I had this stereotype, this feeling of, oh, I'm a stay-at-home mom returning back to the workforce. They're going to think I'm some schlumpy mom. And, I was afraid, is there going to be, because I had young kids still. I mean, they get on you and you have stains and you don't recognize it because you wear it all the time. And I was afraid of being stereotyped of, oh, it just is this stay-at-home mom that isn't very professional. And so I was worried about how that would look too. And just realize that this is hard to accept, but try hard not to think about what other people may be thinking, right? Because most of the time they're not thinking what you are. You're the one that's a lot more self-conscious. But just let it go. Just realize that you are doing something really great, and it's hard to return to the workforce, and just pat yourself on the back for taking those steps to return to the workforce. And it's okay. Don't worry about those stereotypes. Time constraints. That's something else that was hard for me. I didn't have a lot of time in the morning to get myself dressed because I was trying to get kids off to school and trying to, and they would inevitably need something ironed and stuff like that. So I always tried to set up my clothes the night before and make sure that what I had to wear the next day was ironed and ready to go. I remember one time that I had a skirt that I really loved, and I had broken the fastener on the back, so it was no longer attached. And I was in a real hurry. I didn't put my clothes out. I threw on the skirt and I zipped it up, and I realized, oh my gosh, and I was wearing a blouse that I couldn't leave hung out, and so that set me back because then I might have to sew it back on. So as soon as you lose a button, as soon as you have a hook that comes off, try to take the time to repair those quickly, because inevitably you'll want to make sure that your clothing is ready for you to wear when you need it. Another anxiety that you might have is about networking events. So you might have the opportunity to be able to go to a career fair, a job fair, someplace where there's a gathering of other women, other people that are looking for jobs, and you want to make sure that you fit in and you wear those clothing that other people are wearing. So sometimes there's anxiety around that as well. You can always ask the organizers, hey, what's the dress code? Are people dressed in business attire? Are they more casual? And find that out, because then you're not going to have those anxieties over what you are wearing. Another thing is just your overall confidence. I think when you return to the workforce, it's hard, it's scary, because you're thinking you're doing something that you haven't done in a while. And some of you may be in a career and you're just looking for a change, and some of you may not have worked for a really long time. And so returning to the workforce is hard in either case, because you might be wanting to try a whole new different industry, and so you're going to be in a different environment. And then certainly those of you who have been a stay-at-home mom and are looking to return to the workforce, that's scary if what you've been doing for a really long time is caring for your family, which is noble and wonderful. And I'm so glad I got to be a stay-at-home mom for as long as I did. But returning to the workforce can bring all these anxieties and concerns, because it's kind of the unknown, right? And you're just thinking, oh my gosh, how am I going to be able to do this? So I think when I think about the takeaways from this and what's really important is taking the time to assess your current wardrobe and identify your key pieces. Like, that is the first thing you should do, and recognize what you need and what you don't need. And if you go through and you try on your slacks that you haven't worn in a while and you realize that they don't fit, then that's what you need to go out and get. And then if you have a blazer that fits you still and it still looks great, then identify that as a piece you're going to keep. And certainly any accessories that work. Some accessories do go out of style. So if there's a necklace that was really popular 20 years, it probably isn't going to be in style unless it was a really classic piece. So consider that. We talked about saving money by thrift or consignment shopping. and taking the time to go local, and certainly Facebook Marketplace has a lot. In fact, the other day I was just on Facebook Marketplace, and a woman had a bunch of clothes that were just free. So sometimes you can find those people that are not even selling them; they're just offering them for free. Save time by planning ahead. So setting out your clothing, making sure that you're going to be ready for that day the night before, and making sure your clothes are ironed. Sometimes too, when you're in a hurry, inevitably you'll spill something on your clothes, or you'll realize, oh, this isn't ironed. And if you can do it in advance, it just gives you a sense of confidence. Dressing for the industry that you are in. So if you're going into nursing, you're not going to need the business attire that I've been talking about. If you're going to be working at a daycare with children on the ground, you're not going to need it. But if you're going into a law firm, you're going to totally need a nice suit and skirt, and you're going to want to have slacks and all that more business attire clothing. And so just making sure that you experience you take the time to understand what that industry is going to expect for you to wear, and that you dress appropriately. So I love these next quotes because I always like to share great quotes. So this one's by Thomas Edison, and he says, "Opportunity is missed by most people because it was dressed in overalls and looks like work." And your first impression is the most important thing. So you want to make sure that the very first time that you are either interviewing or you're meeting a potential employer or a hiring manager, recruiter, that you put your best foot forward and that you are very professional looking. Like I said, even if I go to interview for a company that dresses more casual on a regular basis, I'll still go into the interview dressed in my more formal business attire, because I want them to know I really want this job. And certainly the other people that are interviewing might dress more casually, and then you'll be memorable. They'll remember you. They'll be like, oh, I remember Heather dressed really sharp. And then when you go in for your first day of actual work, they'll probably say you can dress more casually and you don't have to worry about it. But do know that your first impression is going to make the most impact. And so you want to dress also, we talked about this earlier, but you want to dress the part where you want to be, like dress how you want to be and want to be perceived. So if you want one of those higher level positions, you're going to want to dress like they do. Think about that. You want to make sure you're dressing for the role you want to be in if you don't get it right off in your interviews. I love this quote too by Coco Chanel, and she's a fashion icon that started Chanel. "Dress shabbily and they remember the dress. Dress impeccably and they remember the woman." And you want to be remembered not because of what you wore or didn't wear, but you want to have that confidence and making sure dressing impeccably does not mean dressing, expensively. It means dressing clean, sharp, again, having your shoes polished, your shirt ironed, and being nice and neat. And that also shows in when you walk into a room, when you're dressed really, professionally and impeccably. It's like that says something about who you are. My family is just really important to me, and I know that you all have families as well. And so when you think about returning to the workforce and how are you going to have this confidence, think about how your confidence is going to be built because you're doing all this stuff for them. And my kids have said to me, Mom, you are so much more confident than you were years ago. And I think it's because every time you do something that's a little bit harder, and in this journey of returning to work, you'll get better, stronger. You'll start to feel like you can do more and you're more capable.